Hey everyone, tonight we're traveling back to medieval Europe, not to become a mighty king, a famous knight, or the owner of a magnificent castle, but to live as an ordinary villager whose small wooden home stands only a short walk from towering stone walls. It sounds like a wonderful place to live, doesn't it? As you'll soon discover, appearances can be wonderfully misleading. When most people picture a medieval castle, they imagine banners dancing in the wind, armored knights riding proudly through the gates, grand feasts inside enormous halls, and peaceful villagers happily surrounding their noble lord. Films, paintings, and storybooks have made castles feel almost magical. The reality for nearby villagers was often far less comfortable than those romantic images suggest. Imagine opening your front door before sunrise on a cold spring morning around the year 1400. Instead of hearing peaceful birdsong alone, you hear blacksmiths hammering iron, guards shouting from the walls, horses stamping inside crowded stables, wagons rattling across uneven roads, and workers already preparing another busy day beneath the enormous shadow of the castle. Your own home is small, built from timber, packed earth, and thatch gathered from nearby fields. The castle dominates everything around it. No matter where you walk, its stone towers rise above the landscape like giant cliffs created by human hands. They offer protection during dangerous times, but they also serve as a constant reminder that someone else controls your world. Living beside a castle means living beside power. Every important decision affecting your family passes through those stone walls. Taxes, farming rules, hunting rights, market days, road repairs, military service, and even small local disagreements eventually reach officials serving the Lord inside. The castle is not simply your neighbor. It is the center of your entire existence. Many villagers never enter the grand halls beyond the gate. From outside, they only glimpse guards walking along battlements, servants carrying supplies, and smoke rising from kitchens large enough to feed dozens of people every day. The castle feels both familiar and mysterious. You see it constantly, yet much of life inside remains hidden behind thick stone walls. Protection is often presented as the greatest benefit of living nearby, and that is certainly true when danger approaches. Raiders, rival lords, or foreign armies think carefully before attacking a fortified castle. During peaceful years, the walls seem comforting. Unfortunately, peaceful years do not last forever, and those same walls attract exactly the sort of trouble every villager hopes to avoid. A castle is like a giant magnet for conflict. Armies rarely march across the countryside hoping to capture ordinary cottages. They come for strongholds, bridges, important roads, wealthy estates, and powerful nobles. If your house happens to stand beside one of those valuable places, you may suddenly find yourself living beside the very target everyone else wishes to conquer. Even without war, daily life revolves around endless work. Before the castle wakes completely, villagers are already hauling grain, chopping firewood, repairing fences, tending animals, baking bread, carrying water, and preparing deliveries requested by castle officials. Every season brings fresh responsibilities, and many of them exist because the castle itself consumes astonishing amounts of food and supplies. A single noble household requires flour, vegetables, meat, ale candles, timber, charcoal, cloth, leather, horseshoes, barrels, and endless firewood. None of these appear magically. Ordinary people living nearby provide much of it through taxes, labor, or obligations stretching back generations. The castle may look magnificent from a distance, but keeping it alive demands constant effort from everyone around it. The castle kitchens never truly rested. Before sunrise, servants were already lighting fires beneath enormous iron pots, while bakers kneaded dough and cooks prepared meals for guards, noble families, guests, and workers. Every loaf of bread, every barrel of ale, and every bundle of vegetables began somewhere beyond the castle walls, usually in the fields worked by ordinary villagers like you. Harvest season transformed the entire countryside into one enormous workplace. Men, women, and children all worked from the first light of dawn until darkness covered the fields. The castle expected its share of grain before anyone celebrated a successful harvest. Watching loaded wagons disappear through the castle gate while your own family carefully counted every remaining sack could feel deeply frustrating. Taxes rarely arrived in neat little envelopes. Instead, they appeared as grain, chickens, eggs, wool, firewood, labor, or days spent repairing roads and walls. Some years were generous, allowing families to meet these demands without disaster. Other years brought poor harvests, harsh weather, or disease. Yet obligations often remained exactly the same regardless of hardship. Whenever repairs became necessary, villagers could be summoned to help. Stone had to be carried, timber cut, ditches cleared, fences rebuilt, and roads maintained. Few people questioned these duties openly, because refusing the Lord's command was rarely wise. The castle represented authority, and authority expected cooperation long before it offered gratitude. Market days were among the busiest moments of the week. Farmers arrived with vegetables, cheese, butter, chickens, apples, and handmade tools, while merchants displayed cloth, pottery, candles, and spices from distant towns. The castle brought customers and protection, but it also brought taxes, regulations, and officials carefully watching every transaction made beneath their lord's authority. Children growing up beside the castle accepted sights that visitors found extraordinary. Armored knights riding across bridges, mounted messengers arriving at full speed, falcons circling above noble hunters, and long lines of servants carrying supplies through the gate became ordinary parts of everyday life. Extraordinary things eventually become normal when you witness them every single day. At night, the castle looked completely different. Hundreds of flickering torches illuminated towers and walls, while guards slowly paced the battlements beneath the stars. From your small cottage, the glowing fortress seemed almost magical. Yet behind those bright windows, officials discussed taxes, soldiers prepared for war, and nobles planned decisions that would quietly shape tomorrow's life for every nearby villager. The castle bell becomes the clock that rules your entire village. Before the sun climbs above the distant hills, its deep sound rolls across the fields, through the orchards, and over the muddy roads. You hear it while still wrapped beneath rough wool blankets, long before your body is ready to leave the warmth of sleep. It announces another day of labor, another day of obligations, and another day lived beneath the quiet authority of stone walls that never seem to rest. As you step outside carrying a wooden bucket, the morning air feels cold and damp. Thin mist drifts across the nearby fields, while smoke curls lazily from dozens of cottage chimneys. The castle towers disappear briefly behind pale grey fog before slowly emerging, again as the rising sun paints their highest stones with soft golden light. For a brief moment everything looks peaceful. almost beautiful, until the first shouted orders echo from the walls. The guards have already begun changing shifts long before most villagers finish breakfast. Heavy boots strike wooden walkways above the gate, while armored men greet one another with sleepy voices. Somewhere inside the courtyard, a stable boy struggles to calm an impatient horse, and the sharp ring of a blacksmith's hammer carries surprisingly far through the cool morning air. The castle never truly sleeps. It simply changes from one task to another. Your own breakfast is modest. A piece of dark bread baked several days earlier, perhaps a little cheese if fortune has been kind, and weak ale poured into a rough wooden cup. You eat quickly because work cannot wait. Every hour spent sitting is an hour not spent tending crops, repairing fences, feeding animals, or completing one of the countless duties expected before another sunset arrives. Looking toward the castle while eating becomes an unconscious habit. Smoke rises from several chimneys instead of one, suggesting dozens of cooks preparing meals for nobles, soldiers, servants, guests, and officials all at once. You cannot help wondering what fills their tables this morning. Fresh bread, perhaps, roasted meat, butter, honey. Foods your own family may taste only during special celebrations throughout the entire year. Envy rarely lasts long because work demands attention. Your small strip of farmland does not care about noble banquets or decorated halls. The soil must still be turned, weeds removed, and crops protected from hungry birds. Every season brings different challenges, yet every challenge begins the same way, with tired hands gripping familiar tools beneath the silent shadow of the castle watching from above. The fields surrounding the fortress appear peaceful from a distance, yet every narrow path tells stories of constant movement. Farmers push handcarts loaded with vegetables. Shepherds guide sheep across damp grass. Monks walk quietly toward nearby churches. Messengers ride hard along muddy roads carrying sealed letters whose contents may decide the future of villages many miles away. Every road eventually seems to lead toward the castle gates. Sometimes strangers arrive without warning. Traveling merchants, guide wagons filled with cloth, salt, pottery, or iron tools. Pilgrims carrying worn walking staffs ask politely for directions. Musicians hope to entertain wealthy guests during upcoming feasts. Even wandering craftsmen occasionally stop hoping castle officials might offer temporary work. For villagers, these visitors bring exciting stories from distant lands rarely seen with their own eyes. Children always notice newcomers first. They stop chasing chickens or throwing wooden sticks and gather beside the road, watching unfamiliar faces with endless curiosity. Every horse looks magnificent. Every wagon seems filled with unimaginable treasures. Every traveler carries mysteries about places existing far beyond the surrounding forests. For young minds raised beside one castle, the wider world feels almost impossible to imagine. Older villagers watch differently. Years of experience teach them that every unexpected visitor may also carry unexpected problems. Merchants bring taxes, soldiers bring rumors of war, royal messengers bring new laws. Priests sometimes announce additional collections for the church. Excitement fades quickly when strangers begin speaking with castle officials instead of ordinary people standing quietly outside the gate. By late morning, the castle courtyard grows louder than ever. Wagons loaded with grain creak beneath enormous weight as laborers unload sack after sack into cool stone storehouses. Chickens flap noisily inside wicker baskets. Oxen breathe heavily after slow journeys from surrounding farms. Every delivery reminds nearby villagers of the endless appetite possessed by even a single medieval fortress. The Lord himself remains almost invisible. Weeks may pass without catching more than a distant glimpse of brightly colored clothing crossing an upper balcony. Yet despite rarely seeing him, everyone feels his presence. His decisions determine rents, hunting rights, market rules, and military duties. The castle teaches an unusual lesson. Power does not need to be seen every day to shape every ordinary moment. As the sun climbs higher and another busy afternoon approaches, you wipe rough hands against your worn wool tunic before returning once more to the fields. Behind you, the castle continues buzzing with activity, its stone towers casting long shadows across the land. Ahead lies more work, more responsibility, and another quiet reminder that living beside greatness often means carrying burdens far heavier than glory itself. By midday, the peaceful image of castle life has completely disappeared. The kitchens roar with activity. Stable boys hurry between restless horses. Servants rush through narrow passages carrying baskets, barrels, and firewood, while guards continue pacing the walls beneath the bright summer sun. From your field, the fortress almost seems alive, constantly swallowing supplies and producing endless work for everyone living within its reach. The sound never truly stops. Iron strikes iron inside the blacksmith's workshop. Wheels creak beneath overloaded wagons entering the gate. Dogs bark whenever unfamiliar horses arrive. Somewhere deep inside the castle, a carpenter cuts fresh timber while masons repair weathered stone. Even on the calmest afternoon, complete silence is almost impossible to find for anyone living only a few hundred steps away. You pause briefly to drink cool water from a wooden flask, wiping sweat from your forehead before lifting another heavy bundle of hay. Looking toward the castle, you notice colorful banners fluttering proudly above the towers. They seem elegant from a distance, yet every banner represents authority, wealth, and responsibilities carried almost entirely by ordinary families working the surrounding countryside. The castle bakery produces more bread in a single day than your household might bake in several weeks. Large ovens glow from dawn until evening, while experienced bakers shape hundreds of loaves for soldiers, servants, noble guests, and hungry workers. The comforting smell drifts beyond the walls, reaching nearby cottages where many families quietly wish just one fresh loaf might reach their own table. Sometimes you deliver grain directly to the castle stores. Walking through the great gate always feels slightly intimidating. Thick oak doors, reinforced with heavy iron, stand open while armed guards watch every visitor carefully. Beyond them lies an enormous courtyard filled with unfamiliar faces moving with practiced speed, each person carrying out duties that seem perfectly organized despite the constant noise surrounding them. Inside the walls, everything feels larger than expected. The stable alone houses more horses than your entire village owns together. Piles of chopped firewood rise higher than a man's head. Barrels of ale stand neatly stacked beside cool stone storehouses, while servants disappear into buildings whose purpose you can only guess. Every corner reveals another reminder of the wealth concentrated behind these ancient walls. You quickly learn that lingering is discouraged. Deliver your grain, accept the written tally from the steward, answer only what is asked, and leave. Castle officials value efficiency more than conversation. Their work never seems finished, and neither, it often feels, does yours. The sooner you return home, the sooner another task demands your attention somewhere beyond the fortress gate. Returning to the village, the contrast becomes obvious once again. Stone towers give way to timber cottages. Wide courtyards become muddy paths. Rich tapestries become patched blankets, hanging outside small homes to dry in the afternoon breeze. The castle may belong to another world entirely, yet its shadow stretches comfortably across both worlds without asking anyone's permission. As afternoon slowly fades, women gather beside the village, while exchanging quiet conversations while drawing heavy buckets of water. Their voices remain soft whenever the castle steward passes nearby. Nobody wishes to become known as the family that complains too loudly. Words travel surprisingly quickly in small medieval communities, especially when powerful ears may be listening from only a short distance away. Children continue playing despite the endless work surrounding them. They build tiny castles from mud, pretend to defend imaginary walls with wooden sticks, and chase one another across open fields until tired mothers finally call them home. For them, the great fortress is simply part of the landscape. They have never known life without its towers rising over every sunrise and sunset. As evening approaches, long shadows stretch across the fields while tired farmers slowly gather tools and animals for the journey home. Looking back one final time, you notice the castle glowing beneath the lowering sun. It appears peaceful once again, almost inviting. Yet you know tomorrow morning the same bells, the same orders, and the same endless demands will begin all over again. Walking home along the dusty road, you pass other villagers carrying empty baskets, worn shovels, and aching shoulders. Nobody speaks very much. After hours of labor, silence often feels more comfortable than conversation. The only steady sounds are birds returning to nearby trees and the distant echo of another hammer, striking metal somewhere inside the castle walls. Back inside your cottage, supper is simple but welcome. Thick vegetable pottage bubbles gently over the fire while dark bread rests beside a small piece of cheese carefully saved from market day. The meal is modest, yet after a full day beneath the open sky, it tastes far better than any grand feast imagined from beyond the castle walls. Night slowly settles across the countryside. One by one, candles disappear behind cottage windows until only the castle remains brightly illuminated against the dark horizon. Torches flicker above the battlements while guards continue their endless patrol. As you lie down upon your straw mattress, one thought quietly returns. Living beside greatness may sound impressive, but tomorrow it will ask everything from you once again. Not every evening ends peacefully. Without warning, a horn may sound from the castle gate, its deep note rolling across the quiet countryside. Farmers pause where they stand, mothers call children indoors, and shepherds hurry their flocks toward wooden pens. Nobody knows whether the alarm marks a simple traveler arriving after dark or something far more dangerous approaching from the distant road. Rumors spread through medieval villages faster than horses could gallop. One traveler whispers about bandits attacking merchants 2 days away. Another claims a neighboring lord has gathered soldiers for reasons nobody understands. By sunset, the stories have changed several times, each version sounding more frightening than the last. Living beside a castle means living beside endless uncertainty. Whenever news of possible conflict reaches the castle, preparations begin immediately. Extra guards appear along the walls. Arrows are carried into towers. Blacksmiths work later into the evening, and stable boys prepare horses that may need to leave before dawn. Villagers notice every small change, quietly wondering whether tomorrow will remain ordinary or become a day remembered for generations. The greatest fear is not always the battle itself, but everything surrounding it. Armies require enormous amounts of food, water, timber, and animals. Even before a single sword is drawn, nearby villages begin feeling the weight of military preparation. Every sack of grain handed to soldiers is one less sack waiting inside a family cottage for the coming winter. Your father often reminds you that castles protect people only after danger has already arrived. During peaceful years, ordinary villagers carry the burden of supporting the fortress through taxes and labor. When war finally comes, everyone hopes those years of sacrifice will prove worthwhile. It is a bargain accepted by necessity rather than enthusiasm. Sometimes soldiers march through the village without stopping, their boots raising clouds of dry dust while polished helmets flash beneath the afternoon sun. Children stare with admiration, imagining glorious adventures beyond the horizon. Adults watch with quieter expressions, knowing those marching columns often leave behind empty fields, damaged roads, frightened families, and months of uncertainty. The village blacksmith suddenly becomes one of the busiest people for miles. Broken horseshoes, dented helmets, bent spearheads, wagon wheels, and farming tools all arrive together. Sparks burst from the glowing forge late into the evening, lighting the surrounding darkness with bright orange flashes. Even those trying to sleep can hear the rhythmic ringing of hammer against iron. Women begin storing whatever food they can spare. Dried beans, onions, salted meat, oats, and precious sacks of grain are hidden carefully inside cottages. Nobody speaks openly about preparing for disaster, yet everyone quietly follows the same routine. Experience has taught the village that uncertain times reward those who plan before fear reaches their own doorstep. As darkness deepens, the castle becomes brighter instead of quieter. Torches line the walls, lanterns glow inside towers, and guards continue their watch against the black sky. From your doorway, the fortress resembles a giant ship floating upon an endless sea of darkness, awake while the surrounding countryside struggles to find a few peaceful hours of sleep. Lying beneath rough wool blankets, you can still hear distant sounds drifting from the castle. A gate closes with a heavy thud. A horse stamps inside the stable. Somewhere a guard coughs while walking along the battlements. None of these noises are loud, yet together they become part of the nightly rhythm that every nearby villager knows almost by heart. You eventually fall asleep, knowing tomorrow will probably resemble today. The castle will wake before sunrise. The bells will ring once again. Smoke will rise above the kitchens. Wagons will creak beneath heavy loads, and another long day of work will begin beneath those towering walls. Such is the quiet reality of living beside a medieval castle, where greatness is measured not by comfort but by endless responsibility. The castle never truly belonged to the people who lived beside it, even if they spent their entire lives looking at its towers every single day. Every sunrise reminded you who held authority over the land, and every sunset confirmed that tomorrow would likely follow exactly the same rhythm. Long before the first rays of light reached the rooftops of your village, the fortress had already begun another day. Guards changed shifts on the battlements. Servants lit kitchen fires beneath enormous iron cauldrons. Stable boys carried buckets of water to restless horses, and somewhere inside the walls a sleepy bell echoed through the cold morning air, rolling gently across the surrounding countryside until it reached even the smallest cottages built from timber, clay, and straw. You could never ignore that sound because the bell was more than a signal. It became the heartbeat of the entire community. Whether you worked as a farmer, shepherd, carpenter, blacksmith, brewer, or miller, your day quietly adjusted itself around the routines of the castle. While noble families might still be warming themselves beside large fireplaces, ordinary villagers were already outside feeding animals, sharpening tools, gathering water from the village well, and preparing for another exhausting day beneath open skies. There was little time to admire beautiful sunrises when every hour carried another responsibility waiting patiently to be completed. The road leading toward the castle rarely stayed empty for long. Shortly after dawn, the first wagons appeared, their wooden wheels groaning beneath heavy loads of grain, barrels of ale, chopped firewood, fresh vegetables, baskets of eggs, and sacks of flour. Some belonged to local farmers, fulfilling obligations owed to the Lord. Others carried merchants, hoping to sell expensive cloth, fine wine, iron tools, or spices brought from distant regions. Every traveler knew the castle attracted opportunity, but opportunity almost always arrived carrying work alongside it. Standing beside the road, you could spend hours watching people come and go. Monks walked quietly with lowered heads. Pilgrims carried worn staffs polished smooth by endless miles of travel. Wandering musicians searched for wealthy audiences inside noble halls, and royal messengers urged tired horses forward without slowing their pace. Every unfamiliar face sparked curiosity among village children who dreamed about distant cities they had never seen. Adults watched more cautiously because experience had taught them that strangers often carried news capable of changing ordinary lives overnight. Inside the castle walls, the day unfolded with remarkable precision. Hundreds of people performed different tasks simultaneously, creating a carefully organized world hidden behind thick stone defenses. Bakers shaped endless rows of bread, while cooks stirred great pots of soup over roaring fires. Armorers repaired damaged helmets, fletchers crafted fresh arrows. Scribes copied official documents, laundresses scrubbed mountains of clothing, and servants hurried endlessly between kitchens, storerooms, guest chambers, and great halls. Every person seemed busy, yet the work somehow continued without pause from dawn until darkness. For villagers, however, the castle represented something much simpler. It represented obligation. Every loaf baked inside those kitchens depended upon grain harvested by nearby farmers. Every blazing fireplace required wood gathered from surrounding forests. Every noble feast relied upon chickens, pigs, cattle, vegetables, herbs, butter, and cheese raised or produced by families whose own meals remained painfully modest throughout much of the year. Looking at the fortress from a distance, its impressive towers appeared almost effortless. Living beside it revealed the enormous amount of unseen labor hidden beneath every stone. During harvest season, the countryside transformed into an ocean of movement. Entire families entered the fields before sunrise, carrying sickles, baskets, ropes, and wooden carts. Children collected scattered stalks left behind by adults, while older relatives bundled grain beneath the growing warmth of the afternoon sun. Nobody complained loudly because everyone understood the importance of the harvest. One poor season could mean hunger throughout the coming winter, and yet before families filled their own storehouses. The castle expected its rightful share according to long-established customs. Watching loaded wagons disappear through the castle gate sometimes left a quiet ache inside your chest. You knew the grain would feed soldiers, servants, noble guests, and visiting officials, dining beneath richly decorated ceilings, while your own household carefully measured every remaining sack to ensure enough survived until spring. Nobody questioned the arrangement openly because challenging the established order rarely ended well. Instead, people accepted reality with tired shoulders and continued working because survival demanded practical decisions rather than impossible dreams. Even the weather seemed to behave differently beneath the shadow of the castle. Thick morning mist drifted across surrounding fields before slowly wrapping itself around towers and battlements until the enormous fortress appeared to float above pale clouds. During autumn, heavy rain transformed every nearby road into deep mud, slowing wagons until exhausted horses struggled with every step. Winter covered roofs with frost, while bitter winds swept unhindered across open fields, chilling fingers long before sunrise. Yet regardless of snow, rain, or blazing summer heat, work continued exactly as it always had. Sometimes you wondered whether the Lord noticed these changing seasons at all. From your position in the fields, you occasionally glimpsed brightly colored clothing, crossing an upper balcony or disappearing through a distant doorway. But such sightings remained rare. Weeks might pass without seeing the noble responsible for every important decision affecting your village. Despite this distance, his influence touched nearly every aspect of ordinary life. Roads, markets, hunting rights, taxes, mills, forests, and even local disagreements eventually returned to the authority resting quietly behind those ancient walls as evening slowly approached. The countryside settled into a different rhythm. Farmers gathered tools while shepherds guided tired flocks toward wooden pens. Smoke rose from cottage chimneys, carrying the comforting smell of simple suppers prepared after long hours of labor. Across the valley, the castle glowed beneath golden sunlight, appearing almost peaceful from afar. Visitors might have mistaken the scene for perfect harmony between lord and villagers. Only those living there understood how much invisible effort supported that tranquil picture every single day. Darkness finally arrived, but the fortress refused to sleep. Torches flickered along battlements, while guards continued patient patrols beneath countless stars. Somewhere inside the walls, a gate closed with a heavy echo. Horses shifted quietly within their stables, and distant voices drifted across the cool night air before, disappearing into silence. Lying upon your straw mattress inside a small timber cottage, you listened to those familiar sounds with half-closed eyes, already knowing they would begin again before the sun returned. Living beside a medieval castle was never simply about sharing the landscape. It meant sharing its burdens, its endless demands, and its unbreakable rhythm, day after day, season after season, year after year. Morning eventually gives way to afternoon, and with it comes a different kind of exhaustion. The cool air that greeted you before sunrise has completely disappeared, replaced by the warmth of the midday sun hanging high above the countryside. Sweat slowly gathers beneath your rough linen shirt. while the coarse wool tunic resting across your shoulders begins feeling heavier with every passing hour. The simple act of lifting a wooden basket or swinging a farming tool now requires noticeably more effort than it did only a few hours ago. Yet there is no thought of stopping. Around you, every other farmer continues working with the same determined rhythm, because everyone understands an uncomfortable truth. The crops do not care whether your back aches, the weeds do not pause because your hands are blistered. The castle will not reduce its expectations simply because the day has become uncomfortably hot. Work continues because work must continue, and medieval life rarely offers another choice. Looking toward the fortress once again, you notice how different it appears beneath the bright afternoon sun. Earlier, the morning mist softened its appearance, making the stone towers seem distant and almost mysterious. Now every wall, every tower, every narrow window stands sharply against the blue sky. The limestone reflects sunlight so brightly that parts of the castle almost seem to glow. Colorful banners hanging from the highest towers move gently in the warm breeze, proudly displaying the noble family's symbols for everyone across the valley to see. From this distance, the banners appear elegant and almost festive. Yet you know they represent something far more serious than decoration. They remind every traveler, merchant, and farmer exactly who rules these lands, who owns the forests, who collects the taxes, and whose permission is required before almost anything important can happen. The roads surrounding the castle become increasingly crowded as the afternoon progresses. Merchants arrive from neighboring towns, leading horses burdened with tightly packed bundles of cloth, carefully wrapped pottery, barrels of salted fish, and finely crafted iron tools. Some have traveled for several days, sleeping in crowded inns or beneath wagons, while slowly making their way toward this prosperous estate. Every successful castle attracts trade because wealthy households require constant supplies, and merchants know that noble families often pay better than ordinary villagers ever could. Watching these travelers arrive always stirs your curiosity. Their clothes are different. Their accents sound unfamiliar. Their stories come from places you may never visit during your entire lifetime. For a few brief moments, the wider world feels surprisingly close before another task calls you back to reality. Occasionally, a royal messenger arrives, and the entire atmosphere changes almost immediately. Unlike ordinary merchants, these riders never slow their pace until reaching the main gate. Their horses gallop hard along dusty roads, covered in sweat after many miles of relentless travel. Guards notice them long before anyone else does, quickly opening the heavy wooden gates while stable boys hurry forward to take exhausted animals by the reins. Nobody outside the walls knows exactly what message has arrived. Perhaps it concerns new taxes demanded by the king. Perhaps another noble has declared war. Perhaps a royal wedding is being planned somewhere hundreds of miles away. Information travels slowly in the medieval world, yet when it finally arrives, it often changes lives far beyond the castle itself. Even villagers working quietly in distant fields may soon feel the consequences of words carried inside a single sealed letter. Life beside the castle teaches patience in unusual ways. Many important events unfold without explanation, leaving ordinary people to observe quietly from a distance, while trying to guess what tomorrow might bring. You notice additional guards appearing along the walls. More horses are brought into the stables than usual. The blacksmith continues working long after sunset, producing fresh horseshoes, repairing damaged armor, and sharpening swords until bright sparks dance through the evening darkness. Nobody officially announces what these preparations mean, but rumors spread through the village almost immediately. Some claim a neighboring lord has become hostile. Others insist the king himself plans to visit before harvest. A few whisper that bandits have been attacking travelers only a day's journey away. By nightfall, every version of the story has become slightly different, and every version sounds more alarming than the last. In medieval villages, uncertainty often spreads faster than truth itself. As you continue working beneath the warm afternoon sky, another wagon slowly approaches from the direction of the forest. This one carries enormous oak logs, freshly cut only days earlier. The heavy timber creaks loudly with every turn of the wheels, while 4 powerful oxen struggle against the tremendous weight behind them. Those logs will soon become scaffolding, new roofs, repaired bridges, stronger gates, or replacement beams inside buildings that have stood for generations. Castles are often imagined as permanent monuments built once and left untouched forever. The reality is surprisingly different. A fortress constantly demands repairs. Rain weakens roofs. Winter frost cracks stone. Wooden structures rot beneath. Endless moisture, fire occasionally destroys entire buildings within the walls. Maintaining such a massive complex never truly ends. Even during peaceful years, hundreds of workers spend their lives simply preserving what already exists, while nearby villagers quietly provide much of the labor and material required to keep the great fortress standing strong for another generation. The castle itself may appear calm from a distance, but hidden beneath its quiet stone walls exists an entire world that never slows down. Every doorway leads to another workshop, another storeroom, another staircase disappearing into cool darkness below ground or climbing toward narrow towers above. Hundreds of people move through these passages every single day, each carrying a task that must be completed before nightfall. Kitchen servants balance heavy baskets, overflowing with onions, carrots, herbs, and fresh bread, while stable boys drag bundles of hay nearly twice their own size across uneven cobblestones. Blacksmiths wipe soot from their faces only long enough to begin striking glowing iron once again. And somewhere inside the great hall, scribes patiently copy official letters, one careful word at a time. Very few visitors ever witness this hidden rhythm, yet it is this constant movement that allows the magnificent castle to appear so effortlessly powerful to everyone watching from outside the walls. For villagers living nearby, however, every one of those unseen activities eventually becomes another responsibility waiting patiently beyond tomorrow's sunrise. A servant may require another barrel of ale before the coming feast. The kitchens may suddenly demand hundreds of extra eggs because unexpected guests have arrived. The stable master may need fresh straw. After several new horses enter the fortress, the carpenter may request more timber following storm damage to one of the outer buildings. None of these requests sound especially difficult when considered individually, but together they create an endless chain of work stretching from the castle gate across every surrounding village. One completed task quietly gives birth to another, and before long an ordinary family discovers that nearly every season of the year revolves around satisfying the appetite of the fortress standing over the valley. Even the forests surrounding the estate no longer feel entirely wild. Looking toward the distant tree line, you know those woods are far more than peaceful places filled with birds and deer. They provide the castle with fuel for its kitchens, timber for repairs, branches for fences, charcoal for the forge, and game for noble hunting parties. Every fallen oak may someday become part of a drawbridge. Every straight pine could support a roof beam inside a stable. Every stack of carefully burned charcoal helps the blacksmith shape horseshoes, hinges, nails, locks, and weapons. Villagers enter those forests almost every week carrying axes, ropes, and simple carts, yet very little of what they gather truly belongs to them. The land, like nearly everything else nearby, ultimately answers to the Lord residing safely behind thick walls of stone. Sometimes, while chopping wood beneath tall ancient trees, the distant sound of hunting horns echoes through the forest. Everyone immediately recognizes those deep musical notes. Noble hunters have entered the woods accompanied by mounted guards, trained hounds, brightly dressed attendants, and experienced falconers carrying magnificent birds upon leather-gloved arms. For them, the forest offers excitement, sport, and celebration. For ordinary villagers, the very same woodland represents fuel for winter fires, materials for repairing homes, and perhaps the only place where mushrooms, berries, or fallen branches can be gathered without spending precious coins. Two completely different worlds exist within the same stretch of woodland, separated not by distance but by social position. Returning from the forest with aching shoulders and splintered hands, you slowly guide a heavily loaded cart back toward the village. Every bump in the muddy road shakes the stacked firewood behind you, while tired oxen continue pulling patiently, despite hours of steady labor. Along the way, you pass children collecting fallen sticks, small enough to carry home themselves. Nearby, an elderly woman carefully gathers herbs growing beside the roadside, knowing exactly which leaves ease headaches, calm stomach pains, or help stubborn coughs during cold winter evenings. Medieval life teaches people to waste almost nothing. Every branch, every plant, every handful of grain, and every drop of clean water carries value, because replacing lost resources is rarely easy. Modern convenience simply does not exist. Comfort must be earned, one exhausting task after another. As afternoon slowly begins surrendering to evening, the entire landscape changes once more. The harsh brightness of midday softens into warm golden light, stretching gently across fields ready for harvest. Long shadows extend from cottages, barns, windmills, and finally from the enormous castle itself. Those towering stone walls cast darkness over nearby farmland long before the sun actually disappears beyond the horizon. Standing quietly for a moment, you notice how the fortress seems almost peaceful again. Swallows circle above the highest towers, catching insects carried by the evening breeze, while smoke rises lazily from dozens of chimneys inside the walls. From a distance, it almost resembles the fairy tale castles future generations will imagine. Yet your sore muscles, rough hands, and tired feet quietly remind you that living beside such beauty demands sacrifices rarely shown in stories. Every magnificent view carries countless, unseen hours of labor hidden beneath it, performed by ordinary people whose names history almost never remembers. The final hours of daylight arrive almost without notice. The busy sounds that filled the countryside since dawn begin fading one by one until only a few remain. Farmers lift the last bundles of grain onto wooden carts before slowly guiding tired horses back toward the village. Shepherds whistle softly while their sheep wander through narrow gates into familiar pens for the night. The rhythmic ringing of the blacksmith's hammer finally grows silent after echoing across the valley for countless hours, replaced instead by birds settling among ancient oak branches as if they too have completed another long day beneath the shadow of the castle. Looking around, you realize everyone shares the same exhausted expression. No great victory has been won today. No celebration waits inside your cottage. Another ordinary day has simply reached its end, and in medieval life, that alone is sometimes reason enough to feel quietly grateful. As darkness slowly spreads across the fields, tiny points of warm orange light begin appearing throughout the village. One by one, families light candles or small oil lamps inside their humble homes, careful not to waste precious fuel. Through narrow windows you glimpse familiar scenes repeated in nearly every household. Someone stirs a pot of thick vegetable pottage above glowing embers. Children sit close to the fire, listening while grandparents quietly tell stories remembered from their own childhoods. Worn boots are placed beside the doorway to dry before morning. Damp cloaks hang from wooden pegs after another long day outdoors. A woman patiently mends a torn sleeve, while her husband carefully sharpens a sickle that will be needed again tomorrow. These simple moments rarely appear in grand history books, yet they formed the true rhythm of medieval life for countless ordinary people whose names disappeared long ago. Beyond the village, however, the castle continues glowing brightly against the night sky. Dozens of torches burn above the gatehouse and along the battlements where guards continue their endless watch. Inside the great hall, laughter occasionally drifts through open windows as noble guests finish another generous meal served upon polished wooden tables. Servants quietly clear empty plates before preparing sleeping chambers for tomorrow's visitors. Stable boys spread fresh straw beneath expensive horses, while cooks finally extinguish enormous kitchen fires that have burned almost continuously since before sunrise. Even now, long after ordinary villagers have returned home, the fortress refuses to become completely still. Its heartbeat merely slows, preparing patiently for another day that will begin long before the surrounding countryside awakens once again. You step outside your cottage for one final breath of cool evening air before sleep. Above you stretches an astonishing sky, untouched by electric lights or distant cities. Thousands upon thousands of stars sparkle with remarkable clarity, forming brilliant patterns familiar to generations of travelers, shepherds, monks, and farmers who depended upon them long before maps became common. The great castle stands silently beneath those same stars, its dark towers rising like black mountains against the moonlit sky. For just a brief moment, it almost seems peaceful enough to forget everything demanded by living nearby. The endless taxes, the exhausting labor, the uncertainty, and the responsibilities all disappear beneath the quiet beauty of the night. Yet deep inside, you already know that beauty lasts only until tomorrow's first bell echoes across the valley. Finally, you return indoors, gently closing the rough wooden door behind you. The small fire has almost burned itself into glowing red embers, filling the cottage with soft warmth that feels especially comforting after the cool evening breeze outside. You lower yourself carefully, onto a straw mattress covered by coarse wool blankets that have served your family through many winters. They are far from luxurious, yet after spending the entire day working beneath the open sky, they feel wonderfully welcoming. Your hands remain rough from carrying timber, your shoulders ache from endless lifting, and your feet still remember every muddy path walked since sunrise. Gradually, the familiar sounds outside become quieter. Somewhere far away, a dog barks once before falling silent. An owl glides through the darkness beyond the fields. The distant castle bell marks another passing hour, softer now than it seemed at dawn. You close your eyes, knowing tomorrow will almost certainly unfold exactly the same way. The bells will ring before sunrise. Smoke will rise once more from hundreds of chimneys. Wagons will creak toward the castle gate, carrying food, timber, and supplies. Children will chase one another beside dusty roads, while adults quietly shoulder another day's responsibilities. Such was the quiet reality of living beside a medieval castle. From afar, it inspired admiration, wonder, and dreams of knights and royalty. Up close, it demanded endless work, quiet resilience, and extraordinary endurance from the ordinary people whose lives unfolded forever beneath its towering stone walls. And with that gentle thought, allow the sounds of medieval evening to slowly fade into the distance. Let your breathing become calm and steady, and drift peacefully into a well-learned sleep, leaving the castle, the village, and another long medieval day resting quietly behind you until morning returns once again.